Japan's got a kind of a cultural tradition of lifetime employment, right? And it's not super uncommon now, I think, for folks to change companies, but it was almost unheard of, in the 80s during the bubble. There's a certain, they certainly expect loyalty out of employees, but it's a two-way street. There's a certain amount of loyalty you can expect from an employer as well, right? That they'll have your back. I think that's very kind of ingrained in the culture here. You don't see a lot of layoffs. And of course, there's laws are different here, right? There's layoffs can only be done under certain circumstances. You have to show, that it's absolutely necessary, that there's no way around it. Has management taken a pay cut sufficient to ameliorate this? Yes or no? Okay, they haven't. So do that first, and then you can lay folks. I'm not going to pretend to know all the intricacies of it, but it's certainly more difficult, I think, here to institute those sorts of layoffs. And Japanese businesses, by and large, maybe it feels like sometimes can be a little more risk averse, so they tend to be less likely to get themselves in a situation where they've overstaffed to that degree, because they'll make a series of smaller bets rather than making huge hiring decisions. But again, I'm not really an expert in that field. It's just kind of
I just find it fascinating because obviously I'm not American, and I find American system is can be quite ruthless. Corporate America, right? You can get fired for anything at any point in time.
Sure, employment at will,
which I would think would cause a lot of anxiety. But at the same token, if you've got someone in the company that's dead weight, you can get rid of them quite easily, right? Whereas, right. If you had that in, say, Japan or even here, it would be a lot more difficult. I mean, I've worked for companies where I've had, a colleague that is just mucking around, but because of the systems in place, it's a lot harder to get rid of them.
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm sure. So Japan would probably be similar in that regard, if not stricter, I would think.
Yeah, and I think any company, any business is going to have a certain amount of dead weight, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, where people aren't necessarily working their capacity. And I think in the same way that if you run a store, you understand that a certain percentage of merchandise is going to be shoplifted and there's nothing you can do about it. I think there's an attitude of, well, that's just, that's how businesses are run. A certain percentage of people aren't going to overperform, and we'll just include that in our calculations and hope that the top 10% are going to overperform enough to balance it out, I suppose.